Hello, everybody. This is Murray with you on my podcast, Talk Common Sense. Basically, I'm just testing out going live on Twitter, so I hope you'll bear with me. I don't know a lot about this. I'm using the Spreaker Studio platform, and we'll see how it works out. Main thing I want to talk about, and I just want to touch on something. You know, I'm an older fella. I was born in the early 40s, and I just was thinking about my childhood. I was a teenager in the late 50s and early 60s and graduated high school here in Texas in 1961. But my brother and I, we were talking today about all the funny things that happened to us when we were kids. And it really is something, you know. When I was just not even in junior high, the war hadn't been over, the World War II hadn't been over very long. So we played Army. And back then you could go to an Army surplus store and you could pick up the real deal. I mean, you could pick up helmets and ammunition belts and canteens. Of course, you couldn't pick up weapons. But we would play Army all day long, me and my friends. And at that time, I was a kid. I was living in Austin, Texas. But later on, we moved to Brazoria County, Texas, where my dad got a job with the Dow Chemical Company. And there was a lot of things that happened back then. And, you know, most people my age, they can relate. Because back then, you know, your mama said, go out and play, and come back when the street lamps come on. And so we'd get on our bicycles or whatever and just take off. But back then, I don't believe we had the perverts that we got today in today's world, because nobody ever tried to mess with anybody or kids. And, you know, mom and dad take the kids to the grocery store and leave them in the car. And there wasn't no air conditioning in those cars, and there'd be cars full of kids hanging out the window talking to one another while their folks were in there shopping. But it was a good time. It was a good time to grow up. And I'm real happy that I got to grow up during that time. You know, it's funny how you think back on things that, like going to the movies, you know, it was a big deal. Big deal going to the movies, and usually they were running a serial, which is like a continued episodes, and you'd want to get there and get your popcorn and keep up with the cereal, you know, before the movie came on. And of course there was always a Roadrunner cartoon, and I still enjoy watching those today. So I'm hoping this is getting out to you. Like I said, it's something new to me. I haven't gone live with the podcast, but I don't know. I think it'll be fun, and hopefully we'll get some people that'll come in here and possibly talk to us and whatever. Mostly people my age, you know, people that can relate to those things. Where, you know, the big deal was when you got an air conditioner in your house, and when you got color TV. And there wasn't such a thing as a cell phone. You had them old wall phones, and if you wanted to make a remote call, you went to a phone on a corner in a phone booth and put your quarters in if you wanted to talk long distance. My brother was saying today that he remembers when he saw the first kid with a transistor radio. And boy, he thought that was a big deal. And I guess back then it was a big deal. And you didn't have no internet, and the way you dialed in your reception was you had an outdoor antenna, and Daddy would sit on the couch and he'd put one kid by the TV and he'd put another kid outside to turn the antenna. Then he'd holler through the window when the reception was good, and then he placed the kid on the floor. That was his remote control, that he'd tell the kid to change channels. And I remember when we first moved down, we lived in a place called Lake Jackson, Texas. And no air conditioning. My daddy worked shift work, and that was hot and humid, and he had to try to sleep with the windows up, and had a great big ceiling fan in the hall that was it was like the prop off a B-17. It'd shake the whole house when it was running, but it would suck air in through the windows and halfway cool things off. And the mosquitoes were terrible. So they had DDT trucks that come driving down the street, be blowing out DDT, big fogs of it. And the kids would run behind it because, oh, we love to smell it. Surely they wouldn't spray something that would hurt you. And I remember Daddy saying, when the truck came by, raise all the windows and let the ceiling fan suck that DDT into the house and kill all them dang mosquitoes. But you remember stuff like that. I remember back then, the ninth grade, you were still in junior high. And when you graduated from the ninth grade, then you went to high school. And so all the high school kids, they would come and chase you down. They'd try to circle that local theater, catch you coming and going, and chase you down and put lipstick on your face or pull your pants down. And that was your initiation into high school. It was strange and it was funny, but it was good times. It was great times. And I think about them often. And it seems like the older you get, time seems to just fly by. And you think about things like that. You think about your childhood. In my case, think about the first time you got a bicycle. First time you could save enough money to buy you a little motorcycle. Because back then, kids were just, I'm talking about not rich kids, but just ordinary old working man's kids. You had to earn everything. You wasn't just given a car. First car I ever had, I had to buy. A good friend of mine was a local preacher in our Missionary Baptist church. And he financed it for me. I bought it from his sister. It was a 48 Plymouth Coupe, and it was solid yellow, and she sold it to me for $75. And my preacher friend, he financed it, and I paid him out $10 a month. I don't know, it's funny to think back on it, but it was good times, and I loved it. Kids nowadays with the stuff that's going on, they don't have that innocence that we had, Yeah, when I was in school, nobody even smoked marijuana, The worst thing a kid get in trouble with if he got caught drinking beer, and then the cops would get him for minor in possession. But you knew all the local cops, and they knew you. Our town was like, maybe it had 2 red lights in it. And if you've ever seen that movie, American Graffiti, well, our town was like that, only not as big. And we all had hot rods, and we all drag raced. And I was still drag racing when I was in my 30s, and I still go to drag races and car shows, and it's just something that sticks with you. Motorcycles and fast cars and pretty girls. It all ties together when you're a young man growing up in any small town. And we all had guns. And in these parking lots in these schools in Texas, it wasn't nothing back then to see pickup trucks sitting in the parking lot, old pickup trucks, with loaded rifles on the gun rack behind them, loaded shotguns. Nobody ever thought about going and shooting up a kid, shooting up for a school. Or if you couldn't get it done with your fist, you just didn't do it. That's just the way it was. Like I said before, those were good times. And your teachers back then, there was discipline. You popped off to a teacher, you got your face smacked. Or you got sent to the principal's office and got licks. Hard licks. Usually the coach would give them to you. And nobody had to call their parents and say, hey, we're fixing to whip your kid. Because if they had, the parents would say, well, whip him twice as hard. And my daddy always told me, he said, son, you get a whipping at school and I hear about it, you're going to get another one when you get home. And usually his was a heck of a lot worse than what the coach gave you. But I feel sorry for kids, now they have all these electronics, and as old as I am, I love them and I use them. But kids back then, they didn't sit in the house all day on the computer, and they didn't play video games and all that. They got up early in the morning, they went out and they played ball, depending on the season. I remember my brother had a friend, and he would get up early and he'd walk down to our house, and you could hear him coming as he was thumping that basketball on the pavement. Choom, choom, choom. And here he come. And he'd knock on the door. And he'd say, Miss Montgomery, can your son come out and play? That same kid, he was kind of a nerd. Brother talked about how the other boys got him in the car and threatened to drive him out in the country, and they was going to pull his pants off. They threatened that. They wasn't really going to do it. But somehow he escaped and run to our house, and my brother said he could hear him screaming, and my mother turned on the porch light, and my brother said when he saw that porch light come on, he knew he was in trouble, because that nerd went in there and spilled his guts. And so brother was grounded for a while and also got a butt whipping. But it was a good time. It was a good time, and I wish kids nowadays could experience it. And we had a lot more respect because we were grew up knowing that we'd get our butt beat if we didn't show respect to older people and other people. But I don't know. I think about that now and think a lot of these kids, when they graduate high school, I think they ought to have to go in the service and serve 6 months basic training and let them out, if there's not a war going on. But just send them there to show them some respect and show them how to take orders. A lot of kids nowadays, they don't think they should have to take orders. And that's what's wrong with this generation. And it's real odd that most of the kids that have respect nowadays, and I'm not saying all of them, but most of the ones I found that had any respect were kids that come out of the military. The military, that's our treasure right there, those young men and women who volunteer to protect our country. But I don't know, friends, go back and dig up your old high school annual and look at the kids. And in my case, I look at them and I think about them and I remember them how they looked then. I don't remember them looking old and everything. And now I look at my annual and about a third of them are gone. They passed away. But that's just the way life is, and life passes by real quick. And I've always been, I guess, kind of a pessimist. But I don't know, it's a short life, and the good things that you can do and the good things that you can experience are really worthwhile. And any time that you can go help someone else, that's a good thing, But I guess I ran it enough for this test, because I'll probably go check it out, and I probably haven't recorded anything. But I appreciate you listening, and maybe when I get a little better at this, I'll do some more of these live broadcasts. And in the meantime, I would really appreciate it if you would check me out. Right now I'm banned on Facebook for 30 days because I kind of said some conservative things that went against their community policy, whatever the heck that is. I think their community policy is when you disagree with them, politically or otherwise. But I'm on Facebook, and I've got this podcast, Talk Common Sense, and it's on most all of the platforms. And my videos are on YouTube, and you'll find them at MVM Images. And I hope you'll check them out. Hope you'll like and subscribe if you're of like-mindedness as I am. So we'll end it here, friends, and thanks again for listening. And I'll be talking to you again on down the road. But for tonight, goodbye.